I now call up H.R. 3266, the Peace and Tolerance in Palestinian Education Act. The bill was circulated in advance. The clerk shall designate the bill.
H.R. 3266, to require the Secretary of State to submit annual reports reviewing the curriculum used by the Palestinian Authority and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading is dispensed with, and the bill is considered read and open to amendment at any point. Is there any discussion on the bill?
Yes.
I recognize Representative Sherman.
I'm pleased to introduce this bill as I have in the prior two Congresses. I want to thank Chairman McCall for bringing this bill to this markup. It is the Peace and Tolerance in Palestinian Education Act. This bill has passed this committee without dissent in two prior Congresses. Those were voice votes. This time I'll ask for a recorded vote because I'm told that the majority is more likely to bring up a bill on the House floor as a suspension if it has been the subject of a roll call vote. I won't call a roll call vote to try to put anybody on the spot or waste any time, but I will call for a roll call vote this time. I want to thank so many of my colleagues on this committee who have supported and co-sponsored this legislation over the years. I want to thank Representative Mast as the lead Republican, and thank co-sponsors Moskowitz, Salazar, Schneider, Manning, Chris Smith, Costa, Lawler, Radagwagen, Chair Phyllis McCormick, regular McCormick, Keene, and Liu. Roughly equal numbers of Democrats and Republicans have co-sponsored this bill. What we saw on October 7th shattered all of our hearts. What we understand is that this is the outcome of how generations of children in Gaza and the West Bank are taught to embrace death and terrorism. The schools receive very substantial U.S. aid. They are run chiefly by UNRWA, the UN agency, and this agency receives U.S. aid without sufficient accountability. For years, the United States has been the top donor to the Palestinian people. Keep that in mind. The government whose president was there in Israel yesterday saying that we stand by Israel is also the top donor to the Palestinian people, exceeding the amount of any of the oil-rich states with whom the Palestinians share a heritage and language. And of course, our aid goes to the Palestinian Authority and the UN agency, UNRWA. But American support should not be a blank check. American dollars must be spent in accordance with American values. Just one example. On March 11th, 1978, Dalal Mughrabi and 10 other PLO militants, terrorists, hijacked 2 civilian buses and killed 38 of their civilian passengers, including 13 children, in what is now known as the Coastal Road Massacre. Today, and last year, and the year before that, and the year before that, Palestinian children educated in schools run by the UN and the Palestinian Authority used textbooks describing Mughrabi as a crown of the nation, with a full chapter discussing the massacre in detail and exalting her for heroism. It's not surprising that when we look at Gaza today, we see death because of the education that has gone on. UNRWA has made commitments to address this issue in its 2021 framework of cooperation, but it doesn't actually come through on those commitments. What this bill does is require the State Department to give us a report on the educational materials used in the West Bank and Gaza with our money. The bill will provide Congress with the information we need to respond. Hopefully, it will be used by the State Department to push UNRWA and to push the Palestinian Authority in the right direction. It is time to stop educating Palestinian children for death and terrorism. It is not a great accomplishment and should not be taught as a great accomplishment to Palestinian children to die or to kill civilians. That's why this bill takes the first step. It's a modest bill, and that it is just a first step toward hopefully a future generation of Palestinians who are educated for peace rather than for terrorism. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Mast is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And I want to thank my friend, Mr. Sherman, for his work on this bill and for allowing me to work on it with him. I think there needs to be a realization among many of our colleagues, a coming to Jesus moment, as you might say, that Hamas is literally Palestinians. I keep hearing it said that Hamas is not Palestinians. It doesn't represent all of Palestine, and I wouldn't use it as an absolute. But young people from the time of grade school in the Gaza Strip are given the pedigree to become Hamas, trained to become Hamas from their algebra and arithmetic to their reading, writing, and geography. We have a picture up here. This is obviously a historic photo dating back to World War II, eerily similar to what just happened in the last couple days. Young child saying, calling for the mother, prodded by Palestinian youth. Those Palestinian youth with the pedigree being trained up to become the next Hamas. So don't confuse it that it's somebody else. Year after year after year in this committee, every time, whether it's in this room or another committee room, that we have somebody in here to talk about the relationship between Israelis and Palestinians, or the Taylor Force Act, or another barrage of rockets going on that happens year after year. Whenever we have people in here, I ask them the same question, and I get the same answer over and over, whether it's a Republican witness or a Democrat witness, whether it's somebody that claims to be self-proclaimed polling experts of any Palestinian-controlled area. You name it, the answer is the same, that Hamas would win a popular election, and that's why they don't have the elections there. We know Hamas has won popular elections there, not since, I believe, 2006, as was mentioned before, because they don't have them anymore at this point. But it is well documented on both sides that Hamas is the Palestinians. Everybody should let that sink in and recognize that. They weren't out there reporting their cousins, their nephews, their uncles, their whomever, saying, this is what they're about to do. Stand ready and do what you can to prevent this. Those weren't the videos that you saw. They weren't out there creating mobs standing against the people being pulled into the Gaza Strip who would become hostages, hundreds of hostages, in tunnels. We don't know if being tortured, killed, used as human shields. We don't know, but we didn't see them being stopped by the people keep saying the innocent Palestinians. That didn't take place. Let's give some examples of how their pedigree is shaped from the very beginning. Palestinian sixth graders, grammar exercise, requires them to add the correct verb to the sentences. The jihad warriors fought in defense of their homeland, and the believers rushed to respond the call to jihad. That's a little bit of their grammar. Another example, fourth grade Palestinian math problem. The number of martyrs in the first Intifada is 2,026 martyrs, and the number of martyrs of the Al-Aqsa Intifada is 5,050. The number of martyrs in the two Intifadas is how many martyrs? That's their pedigree. Let's go to another one. Seventh grade physics problem. Newton's second law. During the first Palestinian uprising, Palestinian youths use slingshots to confront the soldiers of the Zionist occupation and defend themselves from their treacherous bullets. What is the relationship between the elongation of slingshots, rubber, and the tensile strength affecting it? Using it for science. Let's use another one. Geography question. Palestinian sixth graders to define the borders of Palestine, which completely erases Israel's existence. People need to move away from this idea of saying that the Palestinians are not Hamas and that Hamas are not the Palestinians. This is what they train them up to be. This is their pedigree. This is what they've proven to be. And I think you would be hard-pressed right now to find the Palestinian that is not in support of the hostages and the killing that took place, as opposed to the ones that stood against it. I yield.
The gentleman yields back. Is there any further discussion?
I've got to respond to that, and then I'm going to give my remarks. Mr. Mast, are you Ku Klux Klan?
No.
Because there was Ku Klux Klan that raised white people to hate black people. And in their books and what they taught every day.
Let me know when you want to
And the
respond.
Ku Klux Klan, today, they're still here. I get remarks, I get phone calls in my office from people calling me and folks in my office and teaching other kids that I'm less than a human being. I don't say all white people are Ku Klux Klan. I don't put them all in one category. Everybody don't belong, all Palestinians don't belong to Hamas, just like all white people don't belong to the Ku Klux Klan.
Do you want a response?
No.
You sure? Because you made it.
I'm sure. I heard you already.
You didn't hear enough yet, though.
I heard you. I don't want to hear any more of it.
You should hear some more, because
I don't want to hear any more of it.
if you want to be willfully naive, do
it's
so.
my time, Mr. Mass.
Be willfully naive.
It's my time.
Willfully naive.
I'm tired of hearing that.
You're ignoring the truth.
We came here today to talk about a terrorist group that's killed individuals in Israel, not a people.
We should have a real dialogue.
And it wasn't all people. My time. I don't want to hear from you.
You're going to.
My time. I don't want to hear from you.
You still will.
Yeah?
Yes, absolutely.
You say something.
Okay, let's have this conversation.
No, I'm not having a conversation with you.
You just said say
You're
so.
not worthy of having a conversation with on this.
I would argue differently.
Madam Chair, we need order. It's the gentleman's time.
Right now, the time is Mr. Mix. Continue.
The United States and many of our allies have long been concerned about Palestinian textbooks that contain blatant anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist references that incite hatred and violence towards Jewish people. In May, the European Parliament went so far as to pass a resolution condemning the Palestinian Authority over the hateful content of its textbooks and conditioning future funding for education on the removal of anti-Semitic material. The United Nations Relief Works agency known as UNRWA, who administers many schools in the Gaza Strip and West Bank, is required by their mandate to use host country books. Let me say that again in another way. UNRWA does not write Palestinian textbooks. The Palestinians do, and UNRWA is required to use host nation books under their mandate. The bill before us asks the Secretary of State to write a report to Congress that reviews the curriculum, including textbooks, leaflets, pamphlets, magazines, and other instructional materials used in UNRWA schools. This report will be important, and it will help both the Congress and the executive branch understand the full scope of the problem. Work to improve these textbooks and remove the content that is not only untrue, but leads to further violence and instability in the region. I plan on voting for Mr. Sherman's bill. I'd like to add one more comment about UNRWA. Despite the issue related to the Palestinian Authority's textbooks, we are discussing at this moment thousands of UNRWA employees, many of whom have years-long relationship with the United States, that remain in Gaza doing incredibly dangerous humanitarian work, and we must keep them in mind as this conflict unfolds. And I yield back.
Will the gentleman yield? Yes.
Wait.
It is not in the interest of Israel, not in the interest of America, for us to embrace the lie of Hamas that they are the official representative of the Palestinian people, or that Palestinians, or that they are representative of the vast majority. Now, I don't know what percentage of Palestinians would vote for Hamas. No one knows. And we don't know what would happen if there was a fair election where speaking against Hamas didn't get you killed. But we do know one thing, and that is the goal of Israel is to destroy Hamas. The goal of Israel is not to destroy the Palestinian people. And if we take the position that they are one and the same, we play into Hamas's propaganda, and we create a circumstance in which Israel cannot achieve its objectives. So that is a separate debate. This is because to the extent Hamas has any support, it is precisely because of an educational system that is so awful. And so taking a step toward improving that education system is an important step. This bill should not be controversial. It should not be where we debate whether Hamas has 10% or 90% or 3% or 42% of popular support, nor does it make any sense to evaluate the popular support anything has in an atmosphere where there's not free speech and democracy. God knows Putin has a lot of support in Russia because you can't find out anything about, you can't get information on the other side. So I think that we have to drive a wedge between Hamas and the Palestinian people. I think we need to pass this bill, and I don't think we need to say that all Palestinians are responsible for what Hamas has done. Keep in mind that Palestinians live in many areas, but three that are there in the area nominally controlled by Israel. Those who are Palestinian Israelis have, as one of their chief leaders came forward and said now is the time to be calm, and expressed just terrible pain at those who had been killed. We have Palestinians on the West Bank who have had more freedom than those in Gaza, and their support for Hamas seems to be considerably less. And then you have those Palestinians who have lived under the thumb of Hamas, who has controlled the information, unfortunately controlled the textbooks. Let's pass this bill, and let's take one step toward letting the Palestinian people have honest information. And if we want to debate the degree to which Hamas has support among Palestinians, let's do it some other day. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Does any member want recognition? Mr. Lawler?
Yes, Madam Chair, I yield my time to Mr. Mast.
Mr. Mast is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Lawler. I could ask for my colleagues' words to be taken down, but I won't, because I believe in free speech, and I believe in your right to speak. I also believe that I am worthy to speak. I believe that I'm worthy to speak simply because I'm an American, and I offered to present thoughtful information that has been brought forward literally in this committee. As I mentioned, and I'll say it again, it's been brought forward by Republicans and Democrats, Republican witnesses and Democrat witnesses, not just in 2023, but 22 and 21 and 2018, 19, you name the year. It's continually brought forward that they would win popular election, that they are the popular group. We don't separate Gaza and the West Bank. in terms of government. That's a different conversation that should perhaps be had. But it's continually said by entity after entity after entity. And the equivalency that's being made here would be like trying to separate the bulk of the German population from those that were Nazis in World War II. The argument that, you want to ask me if I was if I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan because I'm white? Well, I'm half white, I'm half Mexican. I know there's a lot of identity politics that gets played here. But no, of course I'm not. I'm not a part of that hate organization, which I would absolutely despise. But let's recall that they're not our government. They're not. And there's instance after instance after instance of the vast majority of our population that stood up against such hatred, thank God. And look, if you want to have another argument about the history of the Democratic Party, we could do that in length. But I suspect you don't, because you would lose the factual argument on that one as well, because I will bring facts. I will bring facts.
Let's bring facts.
Yeah, let's talk about look,
So
I don't want to
Time.
bastardize Mr. Sherman's bill because it's good policy, but we could talk about the stance of your party, the fugitive slave laws, the history of amendments for people to vote over and over. I mean, we could have another debate on that another day. I'm not going to bastardize Mr. Sherman's amendment for the purpose of your party.
Okay.
But the fact is, I brought facts about exactly what the Palestinian people have been doing. The fact that they weren't standing up against taking these hostages, are not turning over these hostages as we speak. That's just simply not what's happening. Mr. Lawler, I thank you for the time.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. Is there any further discussion?
I'll make this quick, Madam Chair, but I
Phillips
just...
is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a fierce defender of Israel. I have great affection for its people. I despise Hamas, I think like every one of us in this room. But above all, I have affection for humanity, and I think like every one of you in this room, no matter your politics, do. And Mr. Mast, you know my affection and appreciation of you and your service and sacrifices to this country. I just want to make it clear, as a defender of Israel, that I've spoken with a lot of Palestinians because I want to learn about the very question we're talking about right now. Does Hamas represent you? Truth is, the last election was in the early 2000s. An overwhelming majority of Gazans have never had the chance to actually vote for those who represent them. And I just need to say this publicly. I think it is analogous to saying that all Americans are Democrats or all Americans are Republicans. That's not the case. And I just think as we have these discussions that we will be collectively more effective if we recognize that we might be able to play a role in legitimate Palestinian self-determination with a legitimately democratically elected government, with legitimate rights and freedoms and protections and safety and security and prosperity. And I would just ask that we perhaps consider that, because it is my belief as a man of the Jewish faith, as a supporter of Israel, that we all have a responsibility to care about the Palestinian suffering. The same kids, just like little Abigail here, who's being held hostage in Gaza, there are many like her who have nothing to do with this, who are losing their lives, and I just think we need that equal dose of compassion. I just want to say thank you. This is the kind of discussion that I hope we can turn chicken crap into chicken salad. Thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. Mr. Moskowitz, you are now recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make one point, and you all have heard how I feel on this subject, but I don't believe that everyone in Gaza is Hamas, and I don't believe that every Palestinian is Hamas. But I will make one analogous point. If you go to any Holocaust museum, you will learn about all of the Germans that hid Jews in their attic, saved Jews. There are gardens built to these people who stood up during that time. I look forward to hearing the stories out of Gaza for the people who did that, for the Jewish people who were held hostage. With that, I will yield the balance of my time to Ranking Member Meeks.
Great.
Yeah. I just want to say this.
Mr. Mix, you are recognized. Okay.
being raised, and I thank Mr. Phillips for his comments, Mr. Sherman, but it becomes really personal to me. I can recall in my community, because it's personal, when African Americans were being brutalized in the South, in the North, didn't have the right to vote, was whipped, was hung. You say the Ku Klux Klan wasn't the government. Many of them were elected. They were senators. They were members of the House. They were judges. So they were part of the government. And I would urge in my community people who would grow up and say, I hate white people. Because their vision was they were all the same. And I fought to say you can't hate all white people. You can't say they're all the same. Many of them did not come to my aid, or to my parents' aid, or to my grandparents' aid. I've lived it. It would have been easy to say all white people were bad. And many of my folks wanted to do that. Dr. King died. He walked arm in arm with Jewish people to make so that we would all have a better life. There was people that was against Dr. King because he said, I don't hate. I don't put them all in the same category. You can't put human beings all in the same category. And that's what really got me upset here, because what I saw was you're putting human beings all in the same category and saying that there is no difference between the two. I fought against that all of my life. And I'm going to fight for that because we're all human beings. And we're not all the same. There's good and there's bad. Hamas is bad. And I can't stand for just broadly saying everybody, because of one nationality or who they are, that they're all the same. That never brings us to any peace. I'm looking for the day when we can say, and what I love about America and moving forward is that it is allowing people through all the problems we're moving toward, and I was seeking to be a more perfect nation so that everybody can live collectively and not classified as this or that, but as humans. And what I feel about Hamas is the way I felt about the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan didn't look at African Americans as humans. Hamas doesn't look at Jews as humans. And that has got to stop. And we can only do it collectively when we recognize that there are good and bad. Let's go after the bad. But let's try to help the good. Because in the end, if we do that, this place will be a better place. And so I cannot tolerate, and that just upsets me, when we try to put everybody in one circle. It should not happen that way. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Thank you for that discussion.
I would ask
Madam Chairman?
The opportunity to speak for 2 minutes, or I know Mr. Keating hasn't spoken.
Mr. Keating, would you like to speak?
Yeah, Madam Chairman,
okay, you are
please.
now recognized.
Perhaps this is a good time. I sat here and thought back at the early lessons of my life, and I had a grandmother and grandfather who came from Ireland. They worked hard. They brought up 8 children. One of them saved a gentleman's life when he was carrying lead and lost his life. He was machine gunned to death doing that. They've given a lot to this country. And when they were wanted and saved and scrimped, my grandmother was a house servant. My grandfather worked in local farms. And they saved and they scrimped and they wanted to buy a house. And when it was heard that Irish Catholics wanted to purchase a house in the neighborhood back then, people in that neighborhood, Yankee people and people with prejudice, called an emergency meeting in the neighborhood. They said, we have to gather together. We can't let these Irish Catholics buy a house in our neighborhood and own a home. My grandmother told me this story about the meeting. They weren't successful. But a few years later, right down the street, a 2-minute walk, they wanted to purchase some land to build a temple in that neighborhood, a synagogue in that neighborhood. And the same woman went around to the neighborhood with the alarm and said, we have to have a neighborhood meeting so that Jewish people can't have this synagogue in our neighborhood. It'll destroy our neighborhood. And at that time, my grandmother even took the town meeting floor to speak in favor of having a temple in that neighborhood, particularly when the same woman called her up and said, we have an emergency meeting. We need you there. They want to build a Jewish temple in the neighborhood. And my grandmother with a brogue said, well, this wouldn't be the same type of meeting you had about me, would it? And she told me this lesson as a young child. And she told me because she wanted me to know that discrimination against one is discrimination against all. An important lesson that we should remember today. Because Palestinians are being lumped into a category where a terrorist group is there. And you know, when we do this and have this discussion, we're playing right into their hands. We're playing into the hands of Hamas, who have other kind of weapons, other than what we saw just a short time ago in Israel. They have weapons of hate. They want to create violence and turmoil. And they want to stir those up and weaponize those things too. So I think we should realize that, be careful how we categorize things, especially in this position here, where the world will be watching and listening, because we can't play into their hands. They have to be defeated at every level. And that includes making sure that we're not engaging in rhetoric that is divisive, unfair, and discriminatory. I yield back.
Will the gentleman yield?
Gentlemen, yes.
It is wrong, first of all, as to the righteous who protected Jews from the Nazis. They had the opportunity to do so. There are 200, 250 Jews in Gaza. There's no opportunity for a Schindler to hire them or for a Dutch family to shelter them. But there are Palestinians who are helping Mossad, helping Israeli intelligence as we speak. And that is the only practical way. And I would not be surprised if there are Palestinians who identify the location of some of the hostages. So equating Hamas with the Palestinians is wrong for several reasons. First, it's not true. But second, even if it were true, and it is true to some extent, obviously Hamas has some support, it is extremely harmful to Israel to equate the two. Israel may be able to deal with 30,000 Hamas fighters. Israel would prefer not to deal with 2 million people and identify each one of them as an implacable enemy. The fact is that if this operation goes as it should, there are people who will have leaned in the direction of Hamas when Hamas is in power and will lead in another direction, especially when we all hope that the Gaza has better governance a year or two from now. So there may be some people who kind of root for Hamas today and will turn their backs on them tomorrow. But for God's sakes, please vote for the bill. It has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Thank you.
I'm with you on that.